It's the season to get outdoors in New England, and unfortunately, that also means it's Lyme disease season. A recent federal study found there are roughly 3.4 million Lyme tests conducted in the U.S. each year. But how accurate are they? Our partners at the New England Center for Investigative Reporting found some labs may be incorrectly diagnosing patients with unproven tests. WGBH News reporter Rupa Shenoy has the story.
On a beautiful fall day in 2010, Brandy Dean was watching her husband play soccer on a field near some woods. That's when she thinks she was bitten by a tick.
I got really sick. I had severe panic attacks. I had swollen lymph nodes. I had muscle spasms, dizziness. I was losing my hearing.
Dean thought she might have Lyme. Her doctors gave her one of the federally recommended tests for the disease.
I had 3 positive validated tests, and several doctors totally disregarded my positive tests.
That's because doctors consider the federally recommended Lyme tests unreliable. Since Dean didn't have the telltale sign of Lyme, a rash that looks like a bullseye, she was told she probably didn't have the disease.
It was awful. I just felt ignored, completely ignored by the medical community.
Dean ultimately found a doctor willing to treat her for Lyme, but other patients with uncertain test results aren't so lucky, leaving them frustrated and miserable.
I understand why people who may have gone to their primary care physician and been tested by the traditional method who are negative are desperate to try to be diagnosed.
Andrew Onderdonk speaks from experience. The Harvard pathology professor was diagnosed with Lyme disease in 2012 using one of the federally recommended tests.
In my case, it was easy because I had such a positive test result that it wasn't ever an issue. I probably would have sought additional tests for Lyme disease if I thought that's what I had.
Some frustrated patients seek out doctors willing to use tests that haven't gone through a full federal review. Those unvalidated tests can be even less reliable than the recommended tests.
Many of these, because they have not been validated properly, may either misdiagnose someone as having disease that they don't, or alternatively not diagnose somebody who in fact has an infection.
Certain labs sell their Lyme tests without federal review because of a loophole created in the 1970s.
And they're making money on it, and they don't really want to go through the expense of going through a true validation.
New York is the only state that reviews diagnostic tests to make sure they work, and officials there have blocked 7 U.S. labs from selling Lyme tests in the last decade. They include one company cited for quote-unquote substandard scientific practices, and another owned by a man convicted in a medical research fraud case. Both labs tell NECIR they stand by their tests. But Onderdonk says doctors who use unvalidated tests are in danger of misdiagnosing their patients.
And it's hard, I think, for any professional to say, listen, I don't know what's causing your symptoms, but being treated for Lyme disease may be harmful.
Brandy Dean is finishing the antibiotic treatment that alleviated her symptoms, and she now runs a support group for Lyme patients.
I don't think any of us have any confidence in the tests that are available to us now, which is very unfortunate, because I think once you are able to diagnose the illness, then you can help treat these people who are very sick.
Until then, Dean says there will be more stories like hers. Rupa Shenoy, WGBH News.
I'm joined now by the lead reporter on this story. Beth Daley started this investigation a year ago. Thanks for joining us, Beth. Well, you got curious because you had a family situation. What happened there?
I did. My husband's first cousin's wife, who we're very close to, got sick in 2010, and over the course of several months and over a year, she came to believe she had chronic Lyme disease. She unfortunately took her own life in 2012. And the question, it was a very sad, tragic case, as you can imagine, but there was always this question if she really had Lyme. Andrea herself would question it sometimes because the testing, some tests said she did, but most of the tests said she didn't.
So she did test at one point positive for it?
She did, but it was by using a test that was not federally recommended.
Okay, so if some of these doctors are saying that these federally regulated tests are unreliable, why are they recommended?
the federally recommended tests are not perfect. No test is perfect. You're going to miss some people who have the disease and tell people they have the disease who don't have the disease. But the limitations are known. So basically the federally recommended method will say, look, we know we're not good at really diagnosing patients early on with the disease. If you just get a tick bite and your body's building up antibodies, which is what they test for, to Lyme bacteria, we may miss that you're going to get Lyme disease. But the accuracy of that test improves greatly over a short period of time. So by the time several weeks passes, it's going to probably catch you if you have Lyme disease. Unfortunately, unvalidated tests never have gone through that sort of independent scientific review, being vetted by the scientific community. So it's basically people or the public or doctors have to trust a lab's word if the test is correct.
Why is this such a hot potato? We couldn't even get a single doctor. We tried 10, 20, 30 people to come on today to talk about this. Why is it? Because, I mean, is there this whole gray area where doctors are skeptical about Lyme disease, period?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It is, when I first said I was going to look into Lyme disease, I was actually at Andrea's funeral, and there are hundreds of people there. And it became clear to me how controversial it is, and I soon delved into it when I was still a reporter at the Boston Globe looking at Lyme disease, and it is so controversial. I mean, doctors actually have traveled with bodyguards sometimes, and it's absolutely true. Yeah. And it's because of this. It's because many, many people are sick. No one denies that. They're very, very sick. They don't know what they have, but because ticks are becoming such a big problem, they wonder if they got bit by a tick, because they're no bigger than a period at the end of a sentence, so it could bite you and you never know it. They say, I'm sick. The symptoms are very sort of vague. They go to the doctor. The doctor says, we'll test you with these federally recommended tests. They're not perfect, but the best we have. They get a negative result. They say, what do I have? The doctor says, I don't know, but you're actually kind of depressed and anxious, because who isn't when you're really sick? Why don't you go see a psychiatrist? Why don't you go see and people feel, and I've talked to literally scores of them, feel completely alienated by that response. It's not like, let's try to find out what's wrong with you. The doctor says, I don't know, let's treat what you do have. And the patients get very upset and they feel isolated. They then go looking elsewhere for an answer. Who wouldn't, right? And they find this parallel medical world that exists today, filled with a group of doctors who call themselves Lyme literate doctors, who are willing to listen to patients, really try to understand them. Problem is, not all of them are great, and some of them use tests that are not validated. So it's sort of a murky world, because there's not a yes or no answer.
Wow. Yeah. It is very confusing. All right, well, let's hope nobody gets it this summer.
Yeah, exactly.
And their pets, too. That one they seem to be able to treat more easily.
Yeah, there's a vaccine for pets,
right.
but not.
Beth, Daley, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.